right, you guys, welcome back to season 2, episode 2 of Healthspan Horizons. My name is Melissa, as always, here with my co-host Jasmine, and we have a very special guest today, Hannah Went from Tru Diagnostics. Hannah, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Melissa and Jasmine. I'm excited to chat with you all today.
Yes, I know we say this every time, but I love when we get to talk to women on here because it's just, I don't know, it just feels like a hangout rather than like some super technical. Not that it's not technical. I don't know. We're just gonna go with that. That it's gonna be a girl hang today. So, anyway, jumping off that point, Hannah, I would love for you to tell our audience who you are, what you do, and just give us the general lowdown of your.
Sure. Yeah. So my name's Hannah, as Melissa mentioned, Hannah Went. I'm currently now one of the co-founders of Tru Diagnostic and the director of our clinical testing. So Tru Diagnostics, we are an epigenetic testing company, really a health data company. I'm sure we'll hop into more of what that means a little bit later in the episode. But yeah, I'm originally from north of Dayton, Ohio, a super small town. I remember just being a little girl and always being interested in animals, biology, the world, how things work, like, going out back and turning over rocks and finding little critters and getting my hands, down and dirty. So I always knew I wanted to do something in like the science technology field. Went to University of Kentucky in Lexington and graduated in 2019 and was really interested in genetic counseling, kind of this world where there's, a mix of science, but still interacting and working with people. I did my fair share of, traditional labs in college and did not like being secluded and doing, bench work in a lab. So, I kind of turned past when I took just a really unique out there position actually at a compounding pharmacy located a little bit south of Lexington, Kentucky in Nicholasville. And that's when my entire world was opened up to this cash pay integrative functional medicine space where, it's really challenging the current health system, what you hear as, the healthcare model versus the sick care model. And that was just super interesting to me. So we created a lot of unique peptide products. We were the 4th fastest growing healthcare company in the nation in 2019. And that's how Tru Diagnostic was actually born, which is why I'm giving you all of this background information. We needed more objective clinical trials and markers to prove that these unique products we were creating at the pharmacy were working. Thus, we came across biological age and epigenetics really being the best way to measure that. So sold the pharmacy in 2019, took on Tru Diagnostic full-time in 2020, right before COVID. And now we're here 4 years later with one of the largest private epigenetic databases in the world. So it's been a great ride.
Amazing. I, for some reason, did not realize in my research that Tru Diagnostics has been around for only a short period of time. For some reason, I was thinking with everything that you guys have done that this has been like years and years and years in the making. I'm so impressed with the giant 100 times fold growth that you guys have experienced with this. That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. It's been super fun. We've seen, growth over the past 4 years that have really been incredible. When we created Tru Diagnostic, we just had one goal, which was to create the best biological age predictors that have ever been created. And we did that through the lens or the epigenetics, that particular omic field. Mm-hmm. What we didn't realize and what you're starting to see now in the research and development is that epigenetics is just a really cool discovery biomarker tool where you can start to report out other outcomes like clinical lab values, metabolites, proteins through the lens of epigenetics. So it's a really great surrogate and just a cool diagnostic tool to play around with.
I agree. I honestly am I haven't done my biological age test yet. I feel like every time we do these podcasts, I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to go and do this actually afterwards. Then we get caught up in work. But I'm sure Jasmine and will have a lot more to say about that because she loves a biological age test as well. But you guys have also, this is not on one of our questions, but since we're talking about like growth and creating the best one and everything, we're going to have to talk about you guys being in the news and public eye fairly recently, which I'm sure you've had to talk a lot about with other people. But I guess my first question is, did you guys being showcased on the Kardashians, etc., big deal, happen to add a ton of visibility for you guys, and or what came of that, or what's the
Yeah.
background? Give me the
Yeah.
tea.
That was a really, exciting point in the growth of True Diagnostic. We definitely got a ton of attention after our CEO Dr. Matt Dawson was on the Kardashians. I think it was their like last episode in their last season. They took the test, he reviewed them, and it was aired, which was super cool. It definitely felt surreal being in that view of the public eye, and having your company kind of front facing to the entire world. I personally have never seen the Kardashians before that. That was like the first time I had watched it. But yeah, I was definitely not going to miss that episode. So that was really fun. Yeah, it got a lot of attention in news. I think we're also just seeing more and more consumers start to ask for this testing, and patients asking their healthcare providers for this testing as well. So I would say we mainly serve healthcare providers in that functional, cash pay, wellness, integrative, holistic, naturopathic space, whatever you'd like to call it. But a lot of times they're creating accounts quite literally because the patient is bringing this to them and saying, "Oh, I saw it on the Kardashians. What can I do to get my biological age tested?" So we're seeing, this just start to get in more of the public eye, which is really cool, but also super important, right? We know biological aging is the number one risk factor for every single every single disease and death as well. So just, it's very, very clinically relevant too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, like I haven't actually taken this particular one yet, but that's mostly because of the idea of like, poking myself and taking blood. It's kind of like a strange concept. Like I don't have any problem going into a clinic and like having it drawn. I can even watch it and stuff, and that's fine. But like me doing it is like another barrier. So, but I mean, beside that though, yeah, obviously this is, what you mentioned, like people actually requesting it from the providers. That's something that RejuveAI like focuses a lot on, is trying to bridge the gap, between these new technologies and the clinicians, and it's pretty much longevity and basic healthcare. So maybe you can start with like kind of not quite an Eli 5, but maybe like fifth grader explanation of what epigenetics actually is, for maybe people that don't understand it, because it is quite different from, let's say, something like 23andMe or what people think of genetic testing as.
Yeah, great question. I'll quite literally just break down the word. Epi is a Greek prefix, so it just means above or on top of. And then, like you mentioned, Jasmine, more people are probably familiar with like genetics. So we're just looking on top of your genes and how we actually express those genes, because we know our genes don't change throughout our lifetime, right? You get 50% from parent one, 50% from parent two. You're stuck with them unless you're doing some crazy gene editing, which definitely isn't mainstream yet. So we don't have to worry about that too much. And these positions, again, don't really apply clinically. They're not super clinically useful because, again, they're just not changeable. So you're stuck with them throughout your life. Where these epigenetic markers, it's quite literally how you're interacting with your environment, your behavior from your emotional standpoint, how you're interacting with the world physically and spiritually. You're consistently and constantly turning on and off different genes. Even if someone's listening to this right now and they're like, "Oh, this is the most boring thing I've heard all day," or if they're like, "This is really cool, I'm super interested," like your genes are changing in response to that. So that is what makes this testing super clinically useful, because you can start to really predict the future with these epigenetic markers and say, all right, I'm on this trajectory or this path. I need to do something and change my life right now. And we give recommendations on how you can do it and start to lower those risks too. So it really puts the power back in the individual's hands, right? You can no longer say, "Oh, my entire family has type 2 diabetes, right? I'm screwed. I'm going to end up with type 2 diabetes as well. It's just genetics." Not true, right? We have our epigenetics, meaning you can take lifestyle changes, recommendations, going off the type 2 diabetes example, maybe it's working on your insulin sensitivity, exercising more, optimizing sleep, nutrition, etc., to lessen that risk of type 2 diabetes. So I think that's super, super powerful for the end user.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, it's a little bit like sci-fi, but it's kind of almost like kind of recording in real time, what the genes that, kind of natural selection and all those metrics, right? Like it's kind of a snapshot in time of what's
Yeah.
going on there in response to the environment. So that's amazing. And yeah, definitely this should be accessible, to everyone that would desire this information.
Yeah, it's more like the nurture versus nature conversation, right? Where your nature is your genetics, your nurture is actually going to be your epigenetics. And this is starting again to spread more widely, even across social media, right? You see people say like your DNA is not your destiny, or you are what you eat. What are a couple other examples? Things along those same lines, and they're quite literally defining epigenetics without explicitly saying it. So I think it's starting to get picked up a lot more, and knowledge is power. I think more people are doing this testing alongside of a lot of other testing to just start to compile information and learn more about their bodies so they can create make the right choices and create the life they want.
I love it. Okay, so going along with how you're testing and everything like that, as we're breaking it down. So Jasmine kind of mentions that you're taking a blood sample for it. Can you walk me through or walk our listeners through you actually go about taking the test? You guys then, does somebody individually go through and give you personalized insights? And then how often should you come back and retest it?
Yeah, for sure. So as a general consumer, you can just purchase the test online at TruDiagnostic.com. It's the True Age test, the one that relates to the biological aging process, really with the goal of working on increasing, lifespan, how long you're alive, and health span, how many healthy years you have at the end of your life. So it's super easy. You purchase the kit, we ship it to you. It is a finger prick blood spot card. Jasmine, I know you mentioned you don't like to prick your finger. We have these additional units you can purchase. They're like $30. You put them on your shoulder. I don't know if you've ever seen them, Jasmine.
Yeah, I think I read about it and I was kind of interested in that before. I hadn't heard of it before.
It's called a Tasso unit. Tasso Plus is the version we use, and it looks like a continuous glucose monitor. You stick on your arm, you press a button, you don't see or feel a needle, and it takes a little blood sample and an EDTA tube. So you have some options, but traditionally the kit just comes with a finger prick blood spot card. Ship it to your doorstep. You do it in the comfort of your own home. Ship that sample back to our lab in Lexington, Kentucky. We look at about 1 million of these epigenetic markers, so these switches on your genes, and then we used our published, peer-reviewed, validated algorithms to interpret those markers for all sorts of different outcomes. So you get a really nice report back in about, again, 2 to 3 weeks from the time we receive your sample. And the report actually gives you direct recommendations on it. So you don't necessarily need healthcare provider or anyone to go through it with you. I would always recommend, though, a healthcare provider so you can, hold yourself to a particular standard, someone who's been trained in this testing before. And we can definitely recommend or outsource healthcare providers for you if that's of interest. If, you feel confident in your ability to read the report and to, let's say, implement an interventional treatment plan or protocol, you can absolutely be equipped to do that yourself with the reports that we give you. And then to answer the last part of your question, Melissa, we would also recommend testing about every 6 months, I would say on average. Some people do it every 3 to 4 months when they're just starting out, so they can be a little bit more aware of how these markers are changing in response to their interventions. Then every 6 months, and then once you start to streamline every 6 months or so, maybe at least a minimum once a year.
Wow. And I mean, yeah, that brings up, a point too, when you said about people going to their clinicians and interpreting these results, like how many, average GPs out there are going to know what to do or what to say if you bring a report like this to them. I haven't tried it before, obviously, but I feel like that would kind of be a small number. And that's something that we need to improve, I think. We have to get this education within the medical and clinical space, and then connecting with the patients and having these type of conversations in the office of the GP, not just when something's going terribly wrong, like cancer or something like that. So I just wonder, are you kind of aware in that space of, where someone, besides from True Diagnostics, team and staff, like how you would even begin to even get some sort of counseling about epigenetics these days?
Yeah, that's such a great question. We actually don't do any outbound sales. Like we don't have a sales team. We're not going and showing up at GP's doorstep saying, "Hey, are you interested in this biological age testing?" I think we're still far away from that. We, though, continue to just receive so many inbound accounts every single day. I will say we don't do outbound sales in terms of, cold calls or going to offices. We go to a couple healthcare provider related conferences throughout the year, which helps with the exposure. But that's a huge issue is education on epigenetics. This is why I love having conversations with people like you all. This is why I love companies like RejuveAI and being able, again, to not only connect healthcare providers with the right information, but the end consumer or the end client with that information as well. So we do our best to, walk people through like a sales cycle, if you will, and onboard them and speak, one-on-one or in group settings with our healthcare providers to start to educate them on these markers. There is their nonprofit course that just released, I think about a month ago, called the Clinical Epigenetic Society. I think it's just epigeneticsociety.org. They just released a course, and they will have CMEs, or the continuing medical education credits, available early next year. I think once they have those CMEs available, we can push a lot of our healthcare providers to that course because they get, usually a stipend or paid to take courses. Even GPs do that as well. So if we can start to, really push these courses or start to educate on what epigenetics is and why it's important in clinical standpoint, you'll start to maybe see that switch happen ever so slowly, though, I think. We're quite literally creating new biomarkers, causing a paradigm shift, not even in traditional lab testing, but I would say just the entire medical field as well, right? Epigenetics can apply to so many other things, even outside of aging, such as agriculture, cosmetics, drug discovery. So there's a lot of branches we can really touch here.
I feel like we get to this point where it's like always awkward of like, do you respond? Do I respond? Who's talking first here as we come back to this? I am so interested into what else epigenetics is going to touch in the next couple of years. I feel like our common thread on this podcast with whoever we talk to in a variety of different fields is talking about education and the rise of, or the need to rise of, preventative medicine rather than reactive medicine. And no matter if we bring it up or not, it just kind of is underlying theme of pretty much everyone of like, we need to educate people on exactly on how this is beneficial to you. And I'm hoping that, like you said, ever so slowly, we're going to get to that point where we can see this shift in the public and in GPs of just being like, you might be at risk for this. Let's prevent this by adjusting your lifestyle and et cetera, et cetera. So I'm excited for it, but I feel like it's a real slow process, particularly in the U.S. and with our healthcare system and everything like that. Jasmine's got lots of feelings on it, so I keep laughing, but So,
well, it's like in the last few days, but
yeah, it is. So I wanted to kind of dive in a little bit more with True Diagnostic history. So you're talking about 1 million biomarkers that you're testing. Did you guys always start that? Like how have you grown? What did True Diagnostics start with? How's your research expanded in the last few years? Like,
yeah,
what's your big achievements? I feel like in the last few
good
years.
question, Melissa. Again, we set out, I think I mentioned, with that one goal, which was to create the best biological age testing ever created. And we think we accomplished that a little bit over a year ago when we released a pretty large study with Harvard. Again, the more data we can pour on top of these epigenetic markers, the better predictors they're going to become, right? I think we know that, and that's pretty self-explanatory. And in that study we did with Harvard, we actually used clinical lab values, metabolites, and proteins, kind of on top of the epigenetic markers we were studying to build a epigenetic clock that was the most predictive of, again, every individual disease state and death itself. So that was a huge, huge breakthrough for us. Also because just the clocks are getting better, and it can tell you why or how you're aging. And we can do that through the lens of these EBPs, we call them, or epigenetic biomarker proxies. So, we can actually report out things like HbA1c, fasting glucose, albumin, CRP, IL-6 through the lens of epigenetics. And in some cases, interestingly enough, the epigenetic interpretation is actually more reliable and stable and predictive of disease outcomes rather than your traditional biomarkers. I think a really good, easy example of this is take CRP, right? Your or even your high sensitivity HSCRP. You take that, and it can still be pretty unreliable depending on if you worked out in the morning, if you ate before you had your bloods drawn, if you are stressed out. You can see really, really high fluctuations in it. Where this epigenetic interpretation of CRP, when you compare them head to head, is actually more reliable and consistent. So it's going to be more precise than that traditional CRP measurement. And then it's even actually more predictive of brain health outcomes, which your traditional CRP is not. So these epigenetic markers are, just picking up different, maybe better signals in some cases. So I think in summary, you want to almost think of like your epigenetic CRP like an HbA1c of inflammation, where it's capturing more of like a 3 to 6 month running average of your inflammation rather than just a point in time, which is really hard. It's super hard to make a clinical decision just based off of a point in time, right? You want to look at it kind of more chronically, almost in a way, rather than acutely, to be able to make the best clinical decisions. So we're super excited, Melissa, about those EBPs that we've started to develop in collaboration with Harvard. We even released a new product a couple weeks ago called Tru Health, which is an EBP type of report going over, micronutrient levels, vitamins, antioxidants, mitochondrial function outcomes, NAD outcomes, supplement outcomes, all through the lens of epigenetics. So I'll pause there because that's a lot.
I lost my mouse for a second. I was like trying to. Okay, I want to dive in a little bit more to like I think it's further down in my questions, the research partners and collaborations that you guys are doing. But I feel like Jasmine, did you have a question that you were going to ask before we dive into that, or do you want?
I mean, no, actually, it's just because during these calls, it's like the wheels are turning, and that's just always the case in this conversation. So it's always super exciting, to know, what our partners and even our own ecosystem is working on, because sometimes, you get very involved in, the work that you're doing personally, and it can be hard to focus on kind of the other advancements. And sometimes you have to take that time and look around and see all these advancements that are happening all at the same time and what we're really converging on. And, as you're kind of alluding to earlier, I mean, things are changing. Like, obviously, US right now is in a state of, we'll say chaotic array, but there's lots happening there that was very unexpected. And it's a time that I feel like everyone should seize. It's not something that anyone should feel, a certain way about. One should just embrace it and go for it. And that's all I wanted to say about that.
That's us casually glossing over U.S. politics in this non-political podcast that we're hosting. So we'll just seize the day on whatever comes of the future next 4 years in implementations of health and science, et cetera, et cetera.
There you go.
Exactly. And crypto.
and crypto, yes. So anyways, we'll go back to my research question and shift away from dangerous topics in here, although that would be thrilling to talk about. So you mentioned that you guys have collabed and done research with Harvard. What else? What other big things have you guys been doing previously, or do you have down the pipeline in terms of research, collaboration, partnerships, and such moving forward?
Yeah, we have a really good, research collaborationship with Yale as well. So earlier this year, when was it? Maybe it was just a couple months ago, actually, we released a new interpretation of biological aging. So it's called systems age or symphony age. You'll see it be used interchangeably. And it's this epigenetic clock that we licensed from Yale, which measures the aging of 11 different organ systems. So it's really, really exciting. It's covers your brain age, your kidney, liver, lungs, hormone, metabolic, musculoskeletal, immune, I think I missed a couple there, but you get the gist, right? It's this idea that, hey, we don't all get liver cancer at the same time, or lung cancer, or brain cancer, right? We all have different risk factors for those outcomes, and therefore our organs are aging at different rates. So being able to quantify the aging of those organ systems, you can get even more specific in terms of making recommendations for how people should slow their aging. So we were super excited to be able to, help create that with Yale and license it through them directly. We just released a preprint a couple weeks ago, actually looking at 51 longevity-based clinical trials in humans and all of the biological age clocks on them. So it's kind of a meta-analysis review of saying, wait a second, there's a lot of incomplete data out there, right? There's all of these clinical trials showing like only how some clocks measure up against like these interventions that we're testing. And we kind of put everything on a level playing field with our collaborators at Yale. And you're able to start to see, number one, how do these clocks function, right? What are the similarities between the clocks? Do they follow the same trends? And number two, maybe which interventions look interesting to study or look into a little bit further, depending on how they change the biological age clock measurement. So those are some really exciting, some exciting research that we just more recently released, Melissa, to answer your question.
That I feel like you're talking about longevity research, and that is one of the fields that I feel like is not hit and miss, but it's hard to study aging, to be completely honest with you, because it it just is a continuous thing, and right now nobody's solved that. We're not all living forever, et cetera, et cetera. So, and I do feel like the data that's coming out of it also varies a lot, and like you said, it's not totally conclusive. So bringing it all together, love it. I'll have to read the Cliff Notes version of that because I am not a researcher. But you know what? I'll use the little chat GPT to break it down.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think, Melissa, that's why the biological age clocks are so exciting though, right? You're like, oh, there's so much, research, it's hard to capture. I think, and again, there are many tools to measure biological age. Let's set that straight, outside of even just epigenetics too. But, epigenetics is starting to look almost like maybe causative rather than just correlative, which makes it super exciting from like a researcher standpoint. And it acts as almost this like universal measuring stick to say, okay, how are we measuring aging? Can we actually start to see these changes in the biological age or the reversal? That way you don't have to wait for 40-year longitudinal trials to happen. And then you're already dead by the time those results come out anyway. So you can't do much about it, right? We're quite, trying to fight aging as we're aging very rapidly as a society and species.
Right.
Justin, are you okay? There.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I was thinking about, the way that these factors are seeming to correlate. It's almost algorithmic, right? And so are you working with any AI solutions or had any breakthroughs there that you can speak about here? Because, I just wonder like what happens when you do apply these, natural algorithms that we can create with our human brains, and then we kind of start to put them into automation and combine them and things of that nature. Like what has been, your experiences with AI, or, how you view that it's going to transform the space?
Yeah, definitely. I'll be quite honest here. That is not my area of expertise, but it definitely is our bioinformatics areas of expertise. And I know we've used a lot of machine learning. We've used a lot of AI in terms of being able to map out these epigenetic biomarker proxies, right? And choose ones which are, most highly correlative to specific disease outcomes. So a lot of the validation work I know they're using as well, right, to show, again, it's highly predictive of outcomes. So absolutely, we're leveraging that. I think it's really interesting to sit in on those conversations with our bioinformatics team and them talk about how they are continuously retraining models in order to figure out what's working the best. They're using some models you may be familiar with. I'm not quite sure if you are, such as XGBoost, to help train some of the EBPs and see what is generated to be the best. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that one, and we're definitely working on a lot of kind of exotic techniques. Actually, our co-founder, Dr. Ben Gertzel, he's working on AGI, so that's artificial general intelligence, and kind of with the theory of creating like something like a thinking machine.
Mm-hmm.
On our side, we're just trying to make applicable algorithms to people to help them live healthier, better lives. Pretty much increasing health span while we accelerate the pathway to actual aging reversal. And I guess that kind of segues into the next one. As far as reversing these epigenetic markers, how easy or difficult is that, and how much impact can it actually have? Like, what's the maximum there?
Yeah, that's a great question. It does take work. I want to say it's like not super easy, right? People think they can see these age reversals very quickly, but you have to think, hey, you're again quite literally aging when you're taking the test, and if you're taking the test every 6 months, as we talked about earlier in the podcast, right? You have to account for that 6 months of aging in between too. So, um, you know, I will say the more unhealthy you are, the more of a change you're going to see. Like if there are just some really simple things you can do from a diet, sleep, stress, physical activity standpoint, like that's the low hanging fruit that's going to make a world of difference in someone who's not already doing those things. Again, looking at insulin sensitivity issues, even reducing toxic load, limiting alcohol consumption and smoking when possible, are the lifestyle factors I would really start with first. I think then you go into the supplement world. Again, from a supplementation standpoint, we may not see them move the needle that much unless you're actually deficient in said supplement, right? I think now we see a world where people are just grabbing every supplement they can get their hands on. But I think, asking yourself the question, how do I know this is really working? Or do I actually need this is a really good place to start. We do see some medications and pharmacological based solutions showing some promise, I would say, within the epigenetic clocks. Your metformin, your rapamycin, for example, some of the GLP-1s, the SGLT2 inhibitors, acarbose as well. We need more randomized clinical trials on those to actually see what's working and what's not. Of course, from a general population standpoint, but also N of one precision standpoint. It's going to be different in every single person. These epigenetic markers are just so specific to everything you do. So even from these general, larger populational based studies, you need to take into account your own personalized biology. And then lastly, what people are usually most excited about is more of the procedural based interventions. So Jasmine, you're like, what moves the needle the most? Yeah, probably the procedural based interventions. You're thinking stem cells, exosomes, hyperbaric oxygen chamber therapy. There was a really good paper that was just published using our data set out of the Buck Institute with therapeutic plasma exchange. They saw about don't quote me on this, I think I remember it correctly, but they saw about a 2.61 year reversal within the biological age clocks on average in a pretty short period of time as well, which is super impressive. Again, a reversal of any type is really, really impressive. So I think those procedural based therapies are a little bit more exciting to some if they have the basics figured out, right? If you don't have the basics figured out, start there, optimize your lifestyle, and then start to implement things. Almost thinking of it like a, pyramid, so to speak.
Yeah, I was just in MedTech Malta, and I was having a conversation with this guy over lunch. He was talking about this epigenetic test that he took. He was based in, I think, Russia, or Turkey. So anyway, some place over there. First of all, he paid $20,000 for it, and I was like, holy shit. Second of all, he got it. He said it was like 300 pages. The summary of it was that he was basically didn't need to do anything because he was good to go. And I was like, first of all, I can't believe you paid so much money to be told that you're good, you don't have anything to fix. But anyways, he was like, oh, I'm not really like deficient in anything. I don't really need to do anything to like change my lifestyle. Like it was really just like a reassurance that I was good. And I was like, interesting. Okay, I've never heard that before, but I like that. But what you're saying, where I was going with this, was saying that your procedural having the biggest impact is something that I actually hadn't heard before. So that's very interesting, and how that has the biggest, for those of us that are, I guess, already optimizing their health. I say us, like I have optimized my health. I don't think I'm quite there yet, but there's so much, those procedural ones I feel like are just the very cusp of beginning research and getting those trials. And, stem cells, we actually were just talking about this when we were in Thailand as well, as stem cell research stuff is very finicky in the Western world. I feel like we'll say, instead of making it like common practice. So that's I don't really have anything. I'm just saying that's really interesting to hear. Basically, with my long-winded approach of saying.
No, I think it's interesting. Yeah, I'd love to hear what tests that guy you were speaking to took. Because I have yet met anyone who has even gotten those lifestyle factors correct, right? Like, even if you're younger and your biological age, we still give you recommendations on what's the biggest factor that's still pushing it, to tick or the quickest, essentially. So I'm really curious what type of test that was.
No, he didn't give me the name of it. I feel like I wish I could go back and ask. It was just somebody that I met in passing, but he was very proud. He said it was the best one, and I was like, interesting.
And I might have been pumping up the numbers because I'd feel like he got ripped off, but it is what it is.
Yeah, it was. Like I said, and you said, I've yet to meet anyone that was like, you are doing great. I feel like there's, with your body, there's constantly something that you can improve and change and et cetera, to make it be better. So going off that, now that we're just, is there a success story or a research trial or something that you guys have seen, the biggest change with people implementing things from learning what they have through their tests? Or
oh yeah, definitely. I mean, even
yourself.
Yeah, mine. I was gonna say, for example, so I've taken the test, way too many times, even probably 4 times this past year. But it's so cool how you can start to see it correlate with everything in your life, right? I'm a super high functioning individual. I love doing a little bit of everything. And my stress levels can definitely be, through the roof at times. And earlier this year, I got certified in transcendental meditation as a stress reliever. That was super awesome. Funny enough, when I took a really long vacation in Italy, saw my markers go down, took a break, right, from work and kind of that everyday life. So yeah, I think it's fun to really start to test and learn a little bit more about maybe what could increase or decrease that number one risk factor for you, because it really is the most important metric that you would ever measure in your life, even compared to your traditional lab values or even your genetic test as well. I think you need everything. I don't think you just need epigenetics, but I really do think epigenetics is by far the most important.
I feel like if I had access to that test all the time like you did, I would be that person that chronically takes it, to be especially because you briefly mentioned N of 1 trials, being able to test and see the results on yourself at such a level. I feel like I would be okay, well, it's been 3 months, so now I need to see if this works for me, and so on and so forth, and then adjust accordingly. It's really, I'm not going to say it's a rabbit hole to go down, but it kind of is a rabbit hole to go down, to just continue to optimize when you've got the test.
Yeah, definitely.
And everything like that. So, okay. We're going to shift a little bit. We can't believe we're already at 40 minutes. Okay, already. But our last kind of section is kind of where you think True Diagnostics and or research is going in the future. So what's your 5-year plan for you guys? What are your goals coming up in the future?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, again, I talked about the age testing, right? Where we came from, where we currently are with the epigenetic biomarker proxies, and our new product. I don't know if I ever named it, but it's called True Health, that kind of, nutrient micro level testing. That is just a stepping stone to get to our end goal with these methylation risk scores, or these MRSs is what we call them. So these methylation risk scores are actually giving you a specific disease risk for the 7 top diseases in the world. Chronic kidney disease, chronic liver disease, cardiac disease, and we even have a marker for depression, just to name a few. So these are going to be outcomes, again, that you can just get from that finger prick blood spot card. So it's pretty amazing. And we'll take those through FDA approval processes. And hopefully, fingers crossed, those will be available sometime next year. I would say then, you asked more about the 5 to 10 year plan, really just working on getting that reimbursed through payers and then quite literally in GPs' offices all around the world. So I think we'll start to expand the testing we're able to offer and then even expand our laboratory processes as well. So we've created a software solution. It doesn't necessarily have a name. It's just called our DNA methylation analysis suite software, I guess. So it's a mouthful, but basically where we can be in any lab overnight all around the world where they get access to our QA/QC pipelines, they get access to our algorithmic interpretation and can start to run samples locally. That way we can start to expand our international business as well. So those are really the two initiatives that we're looking forward to in the future to be able to expand the testing to just anyone, really.
I guess this was a question that I didn't ask previously, but do you guys service everyone internationally, or are you primarily? I know you're based in the U.S., but are you primarily servicing the Western Hemisphere, or?
Yeah, I would say we'll attempt to work with anyone anywhere, if at all possible. There are some, I would say, countries we just can't ship to, or that have been a little bit harder. But they may be able to source things in their particular area, then still ship samples back to us. So it's dependent on the area, but we do a lot of international business as well.
That's good to know. Yeah, like we're really all about the kind of international component, and as we're creating an international database and reaching out to everyone, and that's like, well, it kind of brings me to kind of two things. It's last question, but kind of something that I wanted to ask earlier. Do you see any significant barriers with getting payers to accept it and kind of integrating it into the medical system at large? And then how do you see like epigenetics changing, the field of science in the future? Like, so kind of the scientific and ultimate vision, I guess you can say the 10-year, but of the evolution of the technology itself.
Yeah. To answer your first question, I definitely think it's going to be hard to see that transition. I think if we get FDA, approval and go through that process to the best of our ability, that's absolutely going to help. I still think the science is there, right? We're not creating a product to wait for the science to catch up. The science is there. That's why we're creating the product. So I think if people can be open minded and curious to challenging the status quo of what's already out there from a biomarker standpoint, then the easier it's going to be implemented. So it I think depends solely on that as a factor. But we'll have the data and the information to back up, all of the claims and enable in terms of being able to predict risk accurately and precisely and earlier too. To answer your second question, Jasmine, basically, where do we see the epigenetic field going, right, within maybe more longer term, even the next 10 years? I think we will see it in general practitioners' offices probably in the next 10 years, where, you go in even for like your Cologuard, right? Or they use epigenetics and look at some expression level patterns. And they've been around for decades and they're a massive, massive company now. I think the same exact thing is going to happen with epigenetics, except it's going to touch more than just cancer. It's going to touch more of those 7 diseases or the killers in the world right now. So I think that's where we'll see this. I'm hopeful, and we'll see if we can make it happen.
It's crazy. It'll be crazy to see it happen in the future. I know we briefly talked about, like, hopefully we'll see the shift into preventative. We'll briefly touch on the politics of who knows what's going to happen with the health aspect of things in the next couple of years as people are put in charge of adjusting our food and health, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm hopeful that we can get to that point where everyone is a little bit more aware of their own bodies. And instead of just going in like, oh, I have this problem, it's like, oh, well, let me see what I can do to not have these problems in the future and to beat genetics. I feel like from my personal standpoint, I have my dad passed away at 50 from a heart attack. So for me, I am very proactive in making sure that that doesn't happen to me. And I feel like it takes an instance like that for somebody to be a little bit more proactive in what they're doing. So I'm hoping that maybe we'll get to this point where it doesn't take a life altering thing for you to be not responsible, but just more aware of like what's actually happening internally. So fingers crossed. We'll see what the next 10 years brings us. But
absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm the same way. My dad passed away when I was super young unexpectedly from a cardiac related event too. Alzheimer's runs in my family. Yeah, right. It's I think everyone has a story like that. If they don't personally, then they know someone who does. So I think it can be a nice little wake up call.
Yeah, agreed. Well, Hannah, I guess the last one we have is, how do people, if they want to take this test or want to get involved with what you guys are doing, how do our listeners get in contact with you guys or buy a test or any of those things?
Yes. Just go to TruDiagnostic.com. So just TRU diagnostic is singular.com. So TruDiagnostic.com. We have a pretty cool website. You can learn a lot about the science behind our test, the research that we've done, the partners that we've worked with, and even purchase a test if you're interested.
Love it. Look at that. We are so on time and prompt today. I love this for us. Sometimes we're not. So I feel like we don't have to edit and cut out a whole bunch of stuff to make it fit the right time. And thank you so much for joining us today. I feel like I've learned so much, and I'm super excited for what you guys are doing and what's going to happen in the future with you. And I appreciate it. It's been so great.
Cool. Thanks, Melissa and Jasmine.
All right. We will sign off and do this real awkward sign off thing, but it's been a pleasure. See you guys on the next episode of Healthspan Horizons.
Thanks so much. And I'll see you next time.